Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 3 of No CopOut, and I'm here with Eric Crafton, president and founder of New Jersey Veteran Support Alliance, LEO, veteran. So one thing I like to do to get started is kind of give people the buy-in. Like, why are you here? Why should we listen to this guy? And I think if you're on the job, everyone has something to say about it. See what I did there?
Yeah, I like it.
You're going to hear him use that on this show a few times, and now I just did it naturally, and I'm very proud of myself. But essentially, this podcast is LEO-centered and geared towards having the conversations that we tend to shy away from because someone's going to be offended or someone's going to be hurt. But I think if you want to better the industry you're in, no matter what industry you're in, but specifically law enforcement, you got to have the hard conversations, right? And
Sure.
You're kind of centered around the mental health aspect. And that's like something you're very proudful in and that you've kind of taken upon yourself to do. And I think that's very important in law enforcement because it's something that's in all the articles. It's, we get talked about the mental health, de-escalation. So it's something we're seeing more apparent in today's society. And we as law enforcement being the first responders, usually the first contact with people when they're having an episode, we should probably be equipped to deal with this and manage this, because if you're not, that's where we get all the fun YouTube videos that we see.
Yeah, that's when you see horrible results, of course.
So I guess one thing, what got you into law enforcement or in this realm of things? How did you get started? What got you on the job?
Well, it's funny. So it all started with, I would say, my first criminal justice class. I went to Hudson County Community College. I was passionate about some of the stuff I was learning. Intro to criminal law in particular. I had a very charismatic, knowledgeable teacher that was a former prosecutor. And it just grabbed my interest. I've always been also naturally kind of a friendly helper type. Like, I always wanted to help people if I was able to do so. And I saw that as a great way to do both. Like, I studied criminal justice. I always wanted to help people or find some way to do that. I found that fulfilling. So law enforcement seemed to be a natural next step for me.
So when you made the decision to go to school for criminal justice, was law enforcement in the back of your mind, or was it like a...
Not really, no. So in my degree path with Hudson County Community College, there was free electives, right?
Okay.
So I entered the semester late. There was an opening in this one class. I heard good things about the teacher, and I said, I'll learn about the law about it. Why not? And there you go, about it, right?
There it is. I told you.
So I jumped into it, and I loved it. Like, I really did like it. So then I kind of knew at that point the direction I was going to go in.
And as you're going in college, you're also a vet, so you joined the military.
Correct.
Was it college first and then military? Was it military first then college, or did they kind of overlap?
No, it was college first. So I was a high school dropout. I had a kid early in life. So, but eventually I didn't like the jobs I was doing. So what do I do about it? I decide to go to school and try to better myself and find a career path that would, one, I would enjoy, and two, I could make, decent living on and support my child. So I entered college. First, I got my GED, then went to college, and I did very well. I really focused in on trying to master writing, try to master, get up to college level writing, learn about the stuff that I was passionate about, which turned out to be criminal justice. So I tried to get high marks in that. But then as I pursued this passion, I also wanted to get into a good school too after Hudson County Community College, which was a great school. The local community colleges, in my opinion, the first 2 years, mastering the craft of writing, mastering the craft of maybe even public speaking, because speech is part of it. They nailed that down very well. Very, very well. Actually, I found Hudson County Community College to be harder than the four-year schools I went to, and also my master's program.
Yeah, you're learning how to learn. I feel like those schools are very important because they kind of set you up for success. And if you approach it correctly, you'll do good in what you're doing. But like coming out of high school, you're told what homework needs to be done, when to read, when things are due. It's very structured, very rigid. Then you go to these colleges, and for a lot of kids, guilty, you're like, oh, I'm free, and there's no teachers telling you, you better get to class. What are you doing in the hallways? But you're kind of on your own. So you're learning how to learn. You're learning how to manage your life. You're learning how to set schedules and plan accordingly. So I feel those community colleges do very well in setting you up for whatever field you're trying to get into. Yeah. So criminal justice was like it's an elective. Let me try because it interests me.
Pretty much. My initial plan was to try multiple different types of electives to find what I liked the most. It just so happened, like by luck, I found that in my first semester.
Okay, and so you go to college. Most people would be like, I'm going to get a job after school. You decided to join the military. What was the motivation for that?
Well, I'd like to say it was pure patriotism. I mean, I'm all about America. I'm all about freedom. I'm all about, defending this country and what it stands for. However, there was some bait at the end of that. So I graduated from Hudson County Community College. I graduated with a 3.8 GPA. I did very well. So I applied to all these other four-year schools. Seton Hall was one of them. They accepted me and offered me a partial scholarship. It knocked 50% off the tuition. But even with 50% off a private school's tuition can be very, very expensive. So I started racking up debt. One day I run into somebody from the Army National Guard. He's currently the command sergeant major for the state of New Jersey for recruiting. And he's like, how much do you owe this school? And I told him the answer. And he's like, I could wipe that out, right? All your debt? And I'm like,
done.
Okay, 1 week in a month, I can do this. I don't know what this is about, but I'll go for it. And I jumped into the Army National Guard.
And what did you do for the Guard? What was your MOS, if you don't mind me?
So it was fun. I was looking because I didn't know I was going to stay.
Yeah, you're like...
I thought it was going to be a one-time deal, in and out, get my college paid for, do some good things for the state, and be done with it. So I looked for the easiest transition available. Because I worked initially at Department of Public Works and I got a CDL, I thought, you know what? I'll become a motor transport operator, 88 Mike for the Army, truck driver. So went to MOS school, had to learn how military trucks work because they're a little different than the regular, civilian trucks, like there's no key, that sort of thing.
Really?
No military truck has a key.
How, for asking for a friend, how do you start these vehicles?
Well, I think it's public knowledge, but there's a few switches you got to hit and stuff like that.
It's like a passcode.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah, that's interesting. So
not really, but kind of.
So you were working for the DPW, and you're like, oh, I'm going to apply my civilian job to the military.
Correct.
And then you start doing that.
Yep. That's pretty much how it started.
And it wasn't in and out. You were there for
17 years.
That's how they get you. My little brother, shout out, my little brother tells me, he's in the Marines. He's like, he's almost done. He's like, oh, I'm going to get out. I'm going to start a civilian job. Next video I get is him saluting on a tarmac. And I was like, oh, what is this about? He's like, well, they gave me a bonus. Like, oh, so you're back in.
Well, the bonus was nice too. Well, the sucky part is you have to pick between two things. You get the cash bonus or you get the college paid for. You can't get both. I wish they gave me both. That would have been kind of cool. But I picked one or the other.
I didn't know that. So at that point, you're in the military. That's especially with the Guard, you learn skills that you can apply to your civil life, and you learn structure and all this good stuff. And on top of that, you learn military things like shooting a gun, getting yelled at all the time, rank, structure. You're learning a bunch of things you can apply to your life. What was the thing that got you into law enforcement? You went to school for criminal justice. You're in the military. You were doing a civilian job. What was that factor that kind of pushed you into law enforcement?
It was probably multiple things. I understood there was groups of people that needed assistance that could not help themselves. And I liked the idea of fulfilling a role that did that. But even in my own personal life, I saw victims of crime. When I was younger, this happened when I was very, very young. My grandmother She was the victim of a robbery where she was slammed to the ground and permanently injured because of that. And throughout my childhood, I would see my grandmother struggling to walk, struggling to do different things because of that robbery. So I think that had a deep effect on me. But
Interesting.
going on and forward, like you keep seeing the same thing. You know, there's victims of domestic violence. There's people that are having trouble that don't know how to fix it. And I just thought it would be very fulfilling as a career where if I had the ability to help them when they could not help themselves. And it's also the ideals of the Army National Guard too. And that's probably why I stayed that long, where you're dealing with people that are in trouble. They don't have the ability to help themselves. They need help. And they call on a certain entity to get that help. And that's what I found very fulfilling. And that's why I ended up staying so long and why I entered law enforcement and so forth.
Yeah, it's kind of, I can resonate with that. Like with law enforcement, people are calling you on their worst day. And I think the longer you do the job, some people lose sight of that and kind of get frustrated with the calls that come in. And I've been guilty of it. You know, you go to serious crashes and serious domestic violence, and then someone's calling you about their neighbor opening their mail, and you're like, this is the worst thing that's happening to you. And like,
my package got taken.
Yeah.
Call Amazon. They'll send you a new one.
But yeah, so like it's easy for us to get into this.
Amazon's the real victim. They should be calling for the police report.
And Amazon's like, right off. That actually happened to me before with a light. I ordered a light from Amazon, and I guess the person delivered it to the wrong address. I didn't know this. I lived in apartments, and it showed like it looked like it was my door. So I tell Amazon, like, I never got this. Well, they're like, all right, we'll send a new one tomorrow. They send me a new one, and then like a couple days later, this person must have opened and realized it wasn't there, saw the address. They bring it to my apartment. So I'm like, okay. So I call Amazon, like, hey, this happened. They're like, I'll just keep it.
Yeah.
I'm like,
it's cheaper to have you keep it than it is to ship it back.
So, so as a cop, it's easy to you're dealing with quote unquote serious things, and then when you're not dealing, and we all have our thing with cops, right? Like we have guys who are into, and girls, let me not get canceled immediately, but we have officers who are into theft or into like cyber crime, or their things are DUIs. Everyone has a niche that they tend to fall into. So like when a call comes in that's not that, you're like, oh, I have to deal with this, you know. But like our job is to, when that phone rings, we have to go.
Sure.
You know, no matter what it is.
And they turned us into a Swiss Army knife of multiple different disciplines. It's not just law enforcement. We're almost uncertified social workers out there.
Yeah, and I love that you said that, because we're going to touch on that. I just had a call with a mother and daughter arguing. Came as a domestic. No, they're just arguing. I found myself there for 30 minutes trying to tell this, and she was 18, trying to tell her like, hey, you're under your mother's roof. You have to respect her wishes. I understand you don't agree with them. And then talking to the mother like, hey, she's an adult now. She needs to start making her own decisions. You need to start respecting her.
Sure.
And it's like after 30 minutes, I tell myself, I'm like, this is not a law enforcement matter. And I've been here for 30 minutes. And I'm like giving them advice. I'm telling them like, hey, I'm just saying, this is what I would do, but you're free to do however you want. But that's what we do.
But spending that extra time, right? There's some cops out there, right? They'll go to that job and be like, oh, this isn't a law enforcement matter. Discipline your own child and leave. But then you're getting called back multiple times. Spending that extra 30 minutes, you probably never heard from them.
We didn't. I didn't. Yeah, and I didn't.
You spend that extra bit of time. Now, unfortunately, there's other pressures out there, right? So if multiple jobs are coming in, you got dispatch asking for updates, saying, are you done yet? Are you done yet? But if you spend that extra little bit of time, you may never get that call again. You might have fully resolved that matter, potentially.
Or assisted them in resolving it themselves.
Sure.
So given that we were talking about niches, what is something you find yourself like, I don't want to say your specialty, because that requires legal aspects, but like what's something air quotes, what's something you found yourself leaning into that you kind of take on and find enjoyment in doing as in law enforcement?
Probably two areas. One is community relations, community policing.
Community policing.
So one of the things I enjoy on my job is I love participating in different events like Night Out Against Crime, where in my township we have 7 different areas having block parties simultaneously, so it requires a lot of resources. But I enjoy the pre-planning, putting it all together, and also seeing how much like the kids and the families are enjoying it. I find that very fulfilling. The other end of it is going back to people that can't help themselves. In my mind, the people that can't help themselves are the ones that suffer from mental illness. If they drop off of medication or can't access medication because of lack of insurance, which is a whole other issue in this country. Those are people I'm just naturally very sympathetic for because they don't have control anymore. And they are probably the people that really need help.
You mentioned two very important aspects of policing that we tend to oversee: community relations and the mental health side of things. On the community relations side, I know people tuning in are probably like, "Oh, here we go. I'm a cop. I'm not like," which, if that's how you feel about it, you should probably reassess why you're doing this. But so you're a part of the actual planning of the events as well?
Well, I'm not in charge of it.
Not in charge of it, but like you find yourself assisting with that?
I'm mixed into it. I assist with it, and it's something I just naturally enjoy doing because, it's a way to bridge that gap, right? More times than not, cops are seen as a punitive thing. Yeah. But really, and this is going to sound like I'm going to get some eye rolls for saying this, but we're actually, people that need help, we're your best friend too, because we're a good cop. We'll try to resolve some of these issues.
And I think that's where it's very important, especially in this line of work. You have to lean into that because, like, quote unquote problem solvers, right? We get called for a problem, whether it's a barricaded gunman with a hostage. Wow, crazy, right? Or there's a raccoon in my yard and it's daytime. Right? That's a problem for someone.
I got that call at Home Depot recently. Yeah. There's a family of raccoons living in Home Depot. I'm like, I don't know what to do with that. I can't help you. I'll call animal control.
Yeah, we don't have animal control. So it's like, I know, crazy. I had a injured bird in a garage.
Yeah, what do you do with that?
I'm like, can you help me catch it? So I'm sitting, I'm already here. I'm sitting in this garage trying to get this bird who doesn't want anything to do with me. So then I get the bird, and I'm like, what do you do with it? So I put it outside near the woods. You're just going to leave it there? I'm like, lady, you called the police. I don't know what you want me to do. I'm not a bird expert.
Arrest the bird?
Yeah, give me your wings. But it's something that people don't understand, and I try to have this conversation in person with them, and they end up just frustrated with me. And I'm not trying to be a douche about it. I'm just like, when you called 911, what was your expectation when I got here?
But that's the double-edged sword of community policing, right? So on one end, you're bridging that gap with the community. You're now seen as a resource. You're seen as their friend that can potentially fix any situation. The other end of it, where it's an unintended consequence, but I'd rather get these calls than not get them, is where you start getting called for everything. The injured bird. My kid won't listen to me. Talk to him.
He's going to arrest you. He's going to arrest you if you don't behave.
My neighbor's a jerk. Can you talk to him? I'd rather get those calls than miss one where it turns into a bigger problem. Like that neighbor that's a jerk. Can you talk to him? That could potentially turn that could go violent really quickly, potentially, without some sort of, let's try to mediate this situation a little bit.
I'm huge on, especially with those, I'll be like, hey, let's talk to him while I'm here. Well, you didn't even talk to your neighbor before you called me? I had one where my neighbor stole my package.
Well, people aren't confrontational. Yeah, so they're looking for that mediation. I see that more times than not. The neighbor won't talk to the other neighbor. They didn't talk to him yet. But most people, from what I see, aren't confrontational. They're a little, they're timid by doing that.
So they're looking
that's something different. But so they want us to be that bridge, and that's part of our job.
How have you seen in your area? This is strictly our opinions. You're coming on my podcast. You're listening to my opinion. No,
all of this is opinion and not policy. So.
Yeah, and this is why I love this forum, right? Because we see things and they're wrong, they're dumb. It's like, well, how about you just listen to what I'm saying, and if it applies, use it. Hopefully it works. If it doesn't, don't use it. hopefully it works.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's no one right way to do it. It's what works for you.
Yeah. What are some ways you found the community events kind of bridge that gap in your area?
Well, most of the kids that we encounter are going to our local schools, going to our local high schools. The hope is the kids get so comfortable and the people get so comfortable that they come to us as a resource instead of trying to handle stuff themselves, and it gets bad really quickly. So for like Night Out Against Crime, the Water Olympics, we do a lot of things throughout the year. But the more comfortable these kids get, God forbid if they're ever in real trouble, they might be comfortable now enough to go to an SRO and tell them their problems. They might be comfortable enough to just walk up to headquarters because they see us as friends and they want to tell us their issue so we can resolve it before it turns into a major issue.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of that. I think, like something that kind of grinds my gears is when you're walking and a parent's like, there's a police officer. If you don't listen to me, you're going to jail.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that, people.
Seriously,
we're not there to scare your children. We're not the boogeyman. We are not that.
Yeah, and I literally tell them, like, no, I'm not. Now, it is important to respect your mom and your dad and listen to them, but you're not going to go to jail for that. I want you to know, if you ever need anything, give us a call. Because if your kid goes missing or something happens and you've put the fear of God in them with cops, they're not going to call us.
And that happened recently. We had a kid this happened last school year. There was a kid that just moved into our area, entered our school district, and the kid was just lost. Like, old enough to walk themselves to school, but just lost and didn't know what to do and was scared. They found one of our SROs blocking a street and went up to him comfortably and said, "Oh, can you help me?" It's that comfortability that made them go to that cop, knowing that they were a resource to help them, and we drove them to school.
Yeah, and the community events are important because outside of that, what other opportunity are they encountering police? The local gas station, the snack center, that's where you'll find me.
I like a good snack. So.
Yeah, so that's where you'll find me.
You'll find me there easily. But
what other opportunities are there?
Not many. That's why it's so important to do it with frequency. Like my department, we do Coffee with the Cop. We're exploring different ways to reach out to children. Doing basically events for all different age groups.
Do you guys do the Touch a Truck event?
We just finished one.
Yeah.
We just finished one. We had the Hudson County SWAT team. We had the regional SWAT team vehicles. We had some Army vehicles that we got through the federal procurement program and that we converted to law enforcement trucks. And the kids loved it. They had a great time. They're climbing all over the stuff. Yeah. We're showing them how to hit the buzzers, the sirens and stuff.
It's the worst when you hear your radio key up. You're like, no, don't touch that.
I'm a big child myself, so I'm getting excited showing them all this stuff. I'm like, hey, watch what this could do. And I just starts flipping knobs and
it's cool to see the kids, especially that because when I was a kid, my experience with cops was not any of this.
No,
it was a different kind of experience.
Far from.
So I always grew up with this me versus them mentality. I'm going to respect you, but I'm going to avoid you at all costs. So there were moments in my life that the trajectory could have changed if I would have just reached out or utilized the resources. But I always seemed like, I can't. And then it wasn't until I became a cop where I realized there's so much more to being an officer than crime fighting. Because when you ask a lot of people, why'd you become a cop? I want to fight crime. I want to arrest bad guys. It's like, cool, get it. But there's so much more that involves being a cop.
And what do we get frequently, right? We get, it's not always getting the bad guy with a weapon that's dangerous to the community. We get somebody that's hungry and stealing food. Arresting them ain't going to fix that. What I like to do, ultimately I got to do what I got to do.
Yeah,
right?
we
if the store wants to sign and complain, it is what it is. But I do like to leave them with resources where, hey, listen, if you're hungry and you got kids at home, here, this is how you can apply for SNAP. This is how you can apply for food stamp benefits. If you have trouble with housing, go to the housing authority and fill out an application. There's different resources to fix that. So that way they're not constantly stealing, but you're actually giving them an off-ramp to get the help that they need.
Yeah, and I think that's where our role is best suitable. we are bridging the gap between a problem and the resources, because we hear this argument online. It's like, oh, we need social workers there because cops aren't social workers. Nor do we try to be. Nor do we we embody that role. Yeah, we embody that role. But it's like, if someone needs, especially in our area, if someone needs mental health assistance,
sure,
we show up, we make sure everything's okay, and then we provide them with the best route to gain that assistance. Mm-hmm. You know, and sometimes the situations escalate and de-escalate depending on what's going on. But like, people think we just show up, we do something, and then we leave, and it's like they're on their own. And that's not the case for our area anyway. And that's something you've kind of you're a part of. How do I word this? It's my ADHD kicking in. Look, mental health is something you strive in.
Sure.
You created an entire nonprofit, the New Jersey Veteran Support Alliance.
Correct.
Before we get into the mental health, what was your goal when starting this? What problems were you trying to fix when you decided to start your own nonprofit?
So if you don't mind to answer that, I'm going to tell you a quick story and it might better explain
Love stories.
So, and I could talk about this case because it's funny, my department actually featured on social media that we were able to resolve this issue. One day we get a call for a veteran that was getting evicted. During COVID, a lot of the counties and a lot of the state programs that we had was supporting people that needed housing during COVID in hotel rooms, and it just kept going. Like, there was no cutoff point. So the person I encountered was actually staying in a hotel for about a year and a half. But eventually, the payments stopped. He wasn't able to afford to support it, so they got an order of eviction, and he was evicted. The day of his eviction, he called the police. He didn't know what else to do. So my department, my supervisors are like, "Well, Crafton's a veteran. Maybe he could talk to him." So I go over there. I talk to him. So I brought him to police headquarters. I'm like, I'm going to make some calls. Let's see what we can do. My supervisor actually said, well, because you're on duty right now, start with the VA, call the homeless helpline. There is one. And if that doesn't pan out, you can go to any feel free to go down the list of your networks. And I said, okay. I'm like, it's going to be a waste of time, but you're telling me to do it. I'll follow, lawful order. I'll do it. So I called the VA, and they were as helpful as I thought they would be. I told them the situation. I told them I was an on-duty law enforcement officer, and I said, this is what I have. What resources do you have for me? The VA gave me a list of homeless shelters. That was their resource.
Like drop off and go.
They have the budget the size of some small countries, and they gave me a list of shelters. So I couldn't help myself. I'm like, you remember what I said I do for a living, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, if I don't know the resources that are in my own county, I should not be on my job at all if I don't know those resources. So how are you helping me? Is this the help that you're giving other people? I just gave up at that point. I said, have a good day, bye, click. And it kind of clicked with me. I'm like, you know what? If they can't do it, they can't provide that first X amount of time. Let's see what the other ones could do. Eventually, going down the line, I went to other nonprofits, great programs. I'm not going to knock them. I'm not even going to name them at this point because they do great work, and I don't want to come out as confrontational. But some of them have a 24 to 72-hour response time where it takes them that long to get out and assess and get them into the program. So my thought was, how do I bridge that gap? How do I help this guy? Because the vast majority of them have a response time like that. So that's where I decided to start the New Jersey Veteran Support Alliance, where part of my fundraising goes into bridging that 24-hour gap until the bigger people can come in and fully assess and take over the case. So that way we can get them off the streets that very moment, not 24 hours from now where I'm going to lose track of them.
And how has that kind of influenced your approach to policing and what you do on the street?
I don't know if it affected much. I mean, whenever I encountered a homeless veteran or someone that was experiencing homelessness, I always tried to find multiple resources for them. It wasn't just, hey, get off this park bench, get out of my town. it can't be like that because they're just going to come back. It's a revolving door. So I always try to offer some sort of resource where they get off the streets. It just so happens that veterans have more resources available to them. But I saw holes in the service, and that's why I was trying to fulfill. Phil.
And have you gone to any specific trainings, or has this been like something you've just leaned into?
Training as far as what?
Like for how to deal with, because what people
How
don't
to deal with
realize,
veterans itself?
well, not even veterans, but like a lot of the veterans who are homeless are usually going through some sort of crisis or something that we don't see, or some cops don't care to dive into, right? It's like, here's a homeless guy on a bench, we got to get him off. When in reality, some circumstances put them there.
Sure. So the vast majority of veterans that I encounter, there's a pride mechanism in there. And this is for the vast majority I deal with, where they don't want to ask for help. They're trying to fix it themselves. But the thing that they don't realize is you do reach a point where it's unfixable, that you need help to get out of it. But from a pride standpoint, they keep trying. And then eventually I get the call when it's already a mess. It's like, they don't call us, like picture a fire in a building. They don't call us when the fire is contained to the kitchen. I get the call when the whole building's up in flames.
Okay, so you're seeing kind of the end result of what's been going on.
Sure.
And you've come up with this foundation to kind of ease them or bridge the gap to get them to bigger resources that are more sustainable long term.
Correct.
Okay, and how is that approach? Like, what is your specialty in policing? Like, or do you find yourself like going to these calls, and has the nonprofit kind of helped you with better resources to deal with the public? Because I know your nonprofit is veteran.
Well, the nonprofit came after my law enforcement career end of it. So in law enforcement, the one thing, I guess the one type of job that I've always tried to help, I put extra effort into, that I enjoyed working with, just because I was sympathetic to their needs, because I'm like, they don't have control. They need help. They really need help. Is people suffering from mental illness, untreated mental illness. They're off their meds because it had a bad effect on them. There's a lot of bad effects with that, side effects that you didn't plan for. They lost access to health insurance and they can't afford the pills or whatever medication they're taking or treatment. I was always very sympathetic to that group. So every type of law enforcement training that I can get that was focused on mental health, I was taking.
Do you have a story, obviously being sensitive to the situation, but where like you saw a veteran in need through and then see them kind of on the other side?
Well, that goes into the eviction story, right? So after I got done with the VA, I was able to get this veteran into a 3-day hotel stay. So it was being paid for by a nonprofit, but I had 72 hours to figure out where he's going next. So I called, in New Jersey, we have a veteran home called Veteran Haven North, where they provide transitional housing for up to 2 years. Meals, housing, you get your own room. It's like a little studio apartment kind of deal. It's nice.
That's nice. Well, now we're in the dark. We'll continue.
Well,
the whole building lost power, but we're wireless, baby.
Huh. That's not a good sign.
That has never happened. And we're back. And I'm keeping that in there because we're all about authentic stories. This is going to be the B-roll. So, 2-year housing. What the fuck? What the fuck happened?
Okay, so there's that access, right? But there's a requirement for that. You have to confirm, you got to get doctor's evidence that you don't have any communicable diseases. How do you do that when you're homeless, don't have insurance, this and that, or you're just recently homeless? You may not have medical insurance. How are you going to get this doctor documentation? So, but eventually I was able to coordinate it. My personal physician is a good friend of mine too. I've known him for years. I asked him for a favor. I said, listen, can you see this guy?
Knows you inside and out.
Yeah, something like that. Can you help this guy? Confirm it. If I'm not asking you to force it. do the testing, confirm it or not confirm it, whatever you got to do. But would you be able to see him? And I told him I'd be willing to pay for it out of pocket. I just felt that bad where I was willing to do that. And he's like, listen, there's no charge for it. Just bring him in. So I brought him in. We were able to complete the application. I called Veteran Haven North. I told him the situation I had. I got lucky, very, very lucky, where they took him immediately. They had available space, and they interviewed him, and they took him right in. He lived there for probably I would say about 6 months, I think. But during the meantime, I brought him a housing application from the township I'm from, and they were able to get him into low-income housing in the municipality, so he was able to come back to the township that he liked.
And that's cool. Like, doing this, helping one person, feel like it's worth it.
Sure.
You know, and now you have an organization on top of the work you do that is doing this for multiple people in some sort of way. You're creating that opportunity for them where there's a lot of obstacles, like you mentioned. Like, I didn't even think of it. That's stuff that we don't even think about. To do this program, which will help you, you need to do these steps, which you don't have access to.
Sure.
How do you get, I don't have a car. The hospital is 30-minute drive, 20-minute drive. How do you get to the hospital with no car or a doctor's office to do these required things?
And the other thing to think about from even a law enforcement perspective, let's say you were not sympathetic and did not help them. Well, now you've got somebody that's on the street, probably sleeping in inappropriate places, maybe in someone's backyard, maybe this, and now you're getting multiple calls. So what's easier? Helping the guy for me, grand total, I think I probably spent between taking him to a doctor's appointment, which probably is going above and beyond at that point, right? Getting him shelter, which I arranged through another nonprofit. Doing everything, helping him with an application. I think grand total I spent 3 hours helping him, but we never got a call again.
And what network have you built while starting this foundation?
Sure. So I was looking for holes in the veteran service community, right? So first was the homeless aspect. How do you fix that? Well, first, you need some sort of transitional housing, so I know the programs. But I also know they have a 24 to 72-hour response time sometimes. The goal from my perspective is bridge that gap. Get them into a hotel or some sort of stable housing for 24 hours until the bigger guys can come in. And a lot of them require the medical stuff, medical clearance. How do you fix that? Build up a team of medical professionals that want to help veterans, so that way we don't have to, we can get them in and cleared for transitional housing as quickly as possible. Okay,
so it's like a multifaceted approach. You provide this kind of temporary place for them to sleep, maybe get a meal, shower,
Sure.
Which if you're homeless, that's something that we overlook too. Like, if I go a day without showering, I'm miserable.
I'm pissed.
Yeah, like I shower 2 times a day.
I'm fluffy. I need a shower daily.
So like we have people on the street who don't have that access, and it's something we overlook.
Sure.
Food. If I'm hungry, I order on my phone or I go to a store. That's something that we overlook for people.
I get grumpy without tonight.
We can call it hangry, sir.
Yeah.
But these are things that we often overlook, and especially as cops. Like, yes, I'm that cop who. I was at a coffee shop. I don't know, go figure. A cop at a coffee shop, and there was a kid doing homework, and he's like, "Oh man."
In a coffee shop?
Yeah, like usually after school, these kids go to the local coffee shop.
Oh, are we talking about high school?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like high school.
This kid I was picturing an 8th grader. They're having a latte.
No, this specific kid was a middle schooler.
Oh.
And I only know that because he mentioned our middle school SRO. So like they wait there for their parents to come pick them up, and it's right across the street from school. So he's like, I'm like, oh, what's up? I always talk to the kids. I'm like, oh, what's up? Oh, I'm doing homework. I'm like drinking my coffee. He's like, yeah, I don't know how I came up, but he's like, oh man, like, we wanted to get a snack, but we don't have enough money. So I'm the guy that goes, all right, cool, let's go. What do you want? But like, here's a kid who's probably hungry, and not saying his circumstances are bad, but in that moment in time, he can't get a snack. Now imagine someone who's living on the street, and you're depending on someone to extend an olive branch and give you a couple bucks or maybe give you a meal. Like, it's out of your control, and that can bring some sort of frustration. Mm-hmm. So now, as cops, we just disregard this because we solved the problem. He's on the bench, no longer on bench. Problem solved, right? Well, now he's frustrated.
For an hour.
Yeah, now he's frustrated. So now I'm hungry. I've exhausted all my means.
Yep.
Goes in a store and steals.
Now you got a shoplifter and 3 hours worth of report writing, booking, arresting,
Yeah, and then the shop
searching.
owner is like, I want him charged because stealing is bad. I get it. I understand. We have a job to do. However, let's look at the totality of the circumstance, right? That's a big police term. Totality of the circumstances.
Absolutely.
We charge him.
Yep.
What's solved?
Nothing. Because they'll be right back doing it.
Like, and you want your stuff back, right?
If you're starving or your family is starving, what would you do? I mean, I'll let you draw your own conclusions, you guys at home too.
Yeah.
But I get it. I really do. Because you want to protect your family. You want to provide for your family, you know? A good parent, you know? Even one that's not holy. You know, if you're a good parent and you have a good heart and you love your children, you're going to do what you have to do. And I get that. We're still going to do what we have to do because law enforcement, right? We have to enforce the law. However, there's nothing stopping us from offering other resources, some education to get them out of that predicament so that way we don't arrest them 20 times in the future. Hopefully this is our one and done encounter.
What are some things cops can do to kind of better equip themselves to deal with situations like this?
Well, you could do what I did. When I first started, I started encountering different problems. So I made it a point to learn about every resource within the state, different state programs, different county programs, to better educate myself so that way when I see a situation, I can offer a resource, I can offer an off-ramp. That's probably the best way to do it because if you don't, now you're arresting the same person 20 times, where in theory, maybe it's a one and done situation.
I keep using overlooked, but again, this is something that's overlooked. When we think policing, we think undertrained. What's the first thing we think of? Tactics, defensive tactics, firearms. Sure. But it's like we have so many areas of expertise that we're expected to be proficient at, not advanced, but proficient at. And this is one that I feel people don't train enough as well, right? Like I always get on here as the third episode. The first two have been about accountability and training. Know your equipment, train jiu-jitsu. Because then if you can control yourself and you can approach a situation and handle it, you're less likely to increase use of force, all that stuff, right? But like, here's a perfect example of a gap. We specifically do not train or do not look at mental health in this way unless it's a mandatory in service. You have to be there. And what do you know about cops who are forced to be at a training?
They're not good at it.
They're not there. They're there, but they're not there.
I wouldn't necessarily force them to do it. Well, I would make them get some basic understanding if I was in charge of it. But the people that are most effective at dealing with mental health are the ones that enjoy it. The ones with the short fuse probably wouldn't be great at that job because it takes time to get them to calm down, get them agreeable to go into an ambulance, at least to the point where you're not using force. The ones that are not into it they might not necessarily dedicate that amount of time to it. And I don't know, it's almost like you're selecting different cops to go to that job, but in a way it's kind of luck because, you know, you might have, let's say me, assigned to this one job I'm working right now, the mental health call comes in, you're not going to hold it for me to get available, you're going to send someone immediately. So it'd be a perfect world if we can train everybody and everybody was equally as passionate, but that's not the case. That's not human nature. Every one of us has our niche.
I agree, but I'll argue that we also have a responsibility to be equipped to deal with situations like this. Hence the no CopOut, right? Like,
I agree.
I work with cops who would tell me, oh, jiu-jitsu. Why am I going to do jiu-jitsu? I'll just use my gun, which...
Oh, Jesus.
Not my department, I have to say that. But I've worked alongside guys.
That is our department. We see something going messed up in front of us, we kind of have to stop that.
Yeah, and I get it, but like, I just recently saw a video of a kid attacking a cop hands on. The cop was so worked up and scared, he pulls his gun out to stop this kid, right? Well, this kid doesn't stop. Well, now you've introduced a lethal tool to a situation that may not be a lethal
and it's
situation.
Not as secured anymore because we have double lock, triple lock.
Yeah, so now you've introduced this.
Now there's no retention except for your hand.
And now he decides to keep going. What's the next thing you're going to do?
Good question.
Use the tool that you introduced, right?
That's what. Kid, I hope not.
Well, you would think, but that's what happened in this situation.
Ooh.
You know, and it's very unfortunate because it's like if you had a basic understanding of controlling a human subject, that wouldn't have happened.
Sure.
But now, because you haven't trained that, you've put yourself in a situation where you're scared and you can articulate, I was in fear for my life. Because this kid who's younger and more fit and more aggressive overpowered you. So it's a shitty situation because you're like, no, I don't agree with this, but like,
that's a tragedy. I mean, there's a few things that could have happened differently. One, why was he sent to this job alone? It should have been a 2-cop job sort of thing.
And it could be resources, it could be whatever it may be, but my point being,
why was he so scared? How big was this kid? I need to know more about that.
Wasn't a big kid either. So at least to my point of, we took this job, we owe it to the people we took an oath to protect, to our families, because now, and to ourselves, because now you did what you did, now you have to live with that. Like, what people don't understand is this cop isn't at home right now like, oh, man, got one. Like, no, he's destroyed that he just took a life.
If he's a human being.
half a decent human being.
If he's
It's
if he's a halfway
his family.
decent human being, that should be the effect. Because I thank God I've never had to encounter this, but I don't know how I'd feel about that.
Yeah, I would assume you'd be.
I'd probably be crushed if it was a situation like that, especially mental health, where I know in the back of my mind they did not have control. I would be crushed about that.
So that's why, like, I'm a huge proponent of having these conversations, because it's like, I know it's not your wheelhouse, but you owe it to your community, your family, and yourself to be equipped at a certain level.
Sure.
And I think mental health and approaching these situations, it's just as important as knowing how to shoot a gun, just as important as knowing how to control a human body. You need to be equipped with how to deal with people, how to respond to certain situations. You have someone screaming at you and yelling profanities. It may not be that they just hate you. They can be they're going through a crisis. How do we manage that? How do we approach the situation?
Well, not only having those basic responsibilities, I'm going to go back to, they really should have sent a second cop to that job. I mean, I'm sure that job didn't come in as, oh, kid needs help. It's kid acting aggressively. We need a cop here. I'm pretty sure that's the case. Maybe. I'm making some assumptions here.
Yeah, again, I'm not.
And if that's how the call came
video.
in, they should have sent 2. So that's bad on the agency that did that, if that's the case. But yeah, from a law enforcement perspective, you can't master it all. You're not going to be a master of everything. But you should have a basic understanding of every tenement of the job. Now, if you want to be very effective at your job, the more resources you're exposed to, the more resources you're knowledgeable about, you might, we all hate our frequent flyers, right? we all hate them. You want to fix that? Give a long-term solution. And you might potentially fix it. I've had frequent flyers before where I introduced to different programs. Then all of a sudden I stopped getting calls about them. And they just disappeared.
And
and then I see them later and they're actually kind of cleaned up. Yeah. They're actually doing okay.
And let's entertain the notion of like, we just want to get rid of this problem that's coming, right? We just want to.
You can't.
It's like, how do you do that?
Unless you're going to fly them to a different state, you're not doing it.
Or a different county.
No, well,
then that county.
That doesn't work by me because we're very metro. We have a lot of public transportation. That will not fix the problem. You're going to have to fly them to like Alaska or something, maybe permanently. Or you carry a few pamphlets on SNAP. You have a few applications for Section 8 for the local municipality. You carry some of these extra things to you're in the booking area, right? The person just got arrested for shoplifting. And listen, I see you stole nothing but food. I'm assuming there might be a problem. Yeah, and in my state, because of bail reform, 99 times out of 100, a shoplifter will be released. Why not have one of those SNAP trifolds or something and give it to them on the way out? You're waiting for the supervisor to approve your booking. During that time, why not say, hey, listen, what is stopping you from saying, hey, you know what, if you want to do an application about it, I can help you right here because I got a computer. You got to say there, I got to say here. But maybe you can go that extra step. What's stopping you from doing that? Nothing.
Literally nothing. I think that's where we need to go a step above and beyond to being more of a resource rather than, you mentioned earlier, being a punitive.
Well, unless you like being stuck in the booking room all the time with the same person. then go nuts.
Then they complain about that.
It is appropriate result. They break the law, they get arrested, right? So if you really enjoy being in the booking room all the time with the same person, all right, keep doing what you're doing. But if you want to fix that problem permanently, it doesn't hurt to have a few pamphlets on you. It doesn't hurt to have a few pamphlets in the booking room. It doesn't hurt to have a basic understanding of the different programs that are available that they may not know about.
Yeah, and it's tough because I'm sitting there as I'm doing their paperwork, and they're like, what's going on? And like, obviously they don't want to talk to you because the whole Miranda thing. So I always do Miranda just because,
sure,
better safe than sorry. But I'll literally look at them and be like, bro, I'm not trying to be facetious. I want to help you out. I don't want you to end up in this position again.
Sure.
And sometimes I have good conversations. Other times I get told, fuck off. You're not gonna. Basically they see us as the enemy, and I can see why. Right? We are a consequence to an action. Mm-hmm. So but like how we approach that consequence, quote unquote, or that response of a consequence, can differentiate you from being a cop and a really good cop.
Sure.
And I think but getting comfortable with mental health and how we approach it is a great step in that, because that's the majority of stuff we're dealing with. We're not dealing with bank robbers every day.
It's crazy with the untreated mental health part. I've encountered, veterans aside, veterans is a whole different animal, but just regular Joe citizen mental health issue. I saw more than I did before I became a cop. But then after COVID, for some reason, those numbers spiked. I don't know why.
People were locked in their houses.
Or I just got lucky and just never encountered all these people, and now I am.
And I think that plays a huge, when you isolate someone, you leave them with their own thoughts.
Yeah.
And if those thoughts aren't good, it's a brewing effect. Sure. Like, what do we do when we have an issue? We step out. Hey, I need reprieve from this situation, right?
But then we had that whole lockdown.
Yeah,
thing.
we weren't afforded that opportunity. So I think that was a big role in the mental health uprising we're seeing. And I haven't heard of anything to combat that. It's like, oh, let's just keep doing what we've been doing.
Yeah, and that doesn't help you. So how many cases have we seen nationwide where, oh, let's keep doing what we're doing, we'll throw them to the hospital about it, but they're not getting treatment. They get briefly assessed and released.
It's a revolving door.
It's a revolving door until it turns into a violent act. And then, we've seen that too. We've seen that in multiple states where cops encountered the same person over and over and over again, and then eventually it ends in deadly force. And it doesn't have to be that way. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of, I have a lot of resources when it comes to veterans because I have the department, love it or hate it. I'm not a huge fan, but it is a resource, the Department of Veterans Affairs, where if I have somebody that's homeless and experience mental health, I have a place to bring them for long-term treatment. So I hate to give them a compliment, but all right, that's one thing that they can kind of do right sometimes. But
someone wants to talk
with regular Joe citizen, it's so much harder. Because look at our healthcare system. It sucks. It does. It's not the best. It's great for us. You probably have whatever you have insurance-wise. I have my insurance. I got, the police insurance, which is pretty good.
I can't complain.
I can't complain either. But what about Joe citizen, his insurance? It depends on if you're network, out of network. It covers this, covers that. And some of these drugs are expensive. Getting an antibiotic lately, look at the price tag on that. Some of them go up to hundreds of dollars, let alone mental health meds.
Yeah, it's something, I'm guilty of it. It's easy to overlook. It's easy you show up to a call, we deal with 30, 40, 50 calls a day. And it's like, it becomes okay, check this one off, do the report, check this one off, do the report. These are people we're dealing with. These are people. These are lives.
Sure.
These are, we have to be more mindful and intentional. And I know some people are going to be like, oh my God. But that's the reality of it.
But then there's a resource, right? Now this goes into learning more about what your local county and state offers. There is state insurance that can go on. If you meet certain income levels, which, if you're almost getting evicted, you probably hit that income level. Where you can go on state insurance. It's a lengthy application process. All things government require paper, but there is a resource to potentially get them on insurance and treatment, but it requires additional time.
What advice what do you have for officers on the job who want to better equip themselves? Like, what would you tell someone who, maybe someone you're working with, like, hey, this is the best way to approach situations like this?
The best way to approach some of these situations, except for, I mean, this is going to sound, although I'm going to get to my rules about this. Cliche, that's a good word. And it is something that one of my supervisors did say. But if you could put in your mind that, this is somebody's mother, this is somebody's sister. What if this was your family member? How would you treat them? If you can have that in the back of your mind, you might have a good result. Also, if you took this job more than a paycheck and you legitimately wanted to help people, the best way to help them is to end whatever problem, if it's within your power to do so. And it's not that hard to have some basic knowledge on what's available to you. If you have those resources, you have a basic knowledge on them. You could potentially, it's not going to be true all the time, but some of the time, if you could permanently fix an issue, you've actually done what you said you were going to do. You actually help this person for the long term, where hopefully you lessen your encounters and you can move on to other areas of, your job. You're not dealing with the same person all the time.
And I feel it's very attainable too. I think a call to your local county or whatever, you can call them like, hey, what resources are available for
or hell, call your boss
homeless or food or
call your boss. Ask him, hey, do you mind if I stop down here and pick up some stuff? A reasonable one would say, sure.
Yeah, like it doesn't take a lot of bandwidth. It's like learning jiu-jitsu. That's a long process. Learning firearms, long process. This is making a phone call and getting a list of resources that now learning how the resources work is another thing, but now you have this list of resources that you can give people, and then they could take it upon themselves to utilize it or not utilize it, but you've given them something extra to help them, hopefully.
Well, and the other thing that you could do is, and this is for higher level, this is like chief level. Maybe bring some of these people in for one big roundtable discussion and share the resources with each other. What do you offer? What do you offer? Like, if you don't already know, try to obtain some of that knowledge, because new programs start all the time. So try to find out which ones are upstarting, any new announcements from the county, bring them in, and start passing out this information to your lowest level officer. Everybody should be equipped with that knowledge and have those resources. And those cops, if they're effective and good, should be utilizing them.
Yeah, one thing we've done that's a really cool thing is when part of your onboarding is getting a list of these resources. And then we're required to carry them in our cars. So like when we're dealing with domestic violence victims, we have pamphlets and things for that. When we're dealing with someone in need of a home, we have resources for that. We're dealing with someone who needs food, we have the local resources for that. So like that's a part of our things we are quote unquote issued. List of forms, these are required to be in your car, and if you can, issue them out when appropriate. If you're dealing with someone who's trying to kill you, but I'm like, wait, but I have this pamphlet.
Yeah.
So, like, obviously.
Okay, obviously you're not going to throw a pamphlet at somebody with a knife. So, that's not happening.
But we're going to get the guys and girls who are like, oh yeah, well, how does that work with this situation? Every situation is different. Obviously, gauge it. You're a cop. You should be equipped with problem solving. And that's one thing I try to instill in especially the new officers. You need to learn how to problem solve. You can't depend on me. You can't depend on Eric. You can't depend on your sergeant, your lieutenant, whoever, to give you the answer. Because there's a point where you have to know how to problem solve with the situation at hand. We can't teach that. That's something you have to do.
On my end, I'm more of a lead from the front kind of guy, so the sergeant should be, responsive and stuff like that.
And I get it, but like if you're like, let's say you're on a call, right? You can't be like, hold on, this is what I have.
True, fair enough.
So you have to learn how to problem solve and deal with situations as they arise.
Sure.
If afforded the opportunity, obviously reach out to resources to help you with decisions, because there's some times where you're dealing with something, it's calm now, and you're like, hey, this is what I got, what should I do? Obviously, but there's always that group of people who are like, well, if someone has a gun to their head and they're counting down, how are you going to help them? Okay, I don't have the answer.
How about
for
try
everything.
talking to them?
Yeah, like have a conversation, tell them not to do it? Start with that. Hey,
No,
don't do that.
it was actually, I had a situation almost, no, not a gun, but I was actually, we have annual reports that are released. So this story was released on that and it's public information, so I could share this one. I actually had a guy that put a knife to his chest when I said, listen, I'm going to take, we're going to get you the resources. He was so scared of the hospital that he actually whipped out a knife and put it to his chest. I talked to him for a good couple minutes saying, hey, listen, it's not worth it. Why do that? You'll feel this type of way. You're going through a lot, and I understand you're going through a lot. Put that down. Let's talk about it. Let's see if I can find you a resource that you are comfortable with. And just talking to him calmly, not barking, shouting orders at him. That probably would have, I don't know how that would have ended, but I do know my approach of trying to be sympathetic, kind, just a little bit of kindness went a long way where he put it down. We went out to the living room and we were able to peacefully get him to a hospital.
No, it's good. It's like telling your wife or girlfriend, calm down when they're angry. Good luck.
Yeah, good luck with that.
like you have to be.
I'll be the victim of a domestic at that point.
You have to be creative with your approach. And like you mentioned something earlier, that's something I embody. It's like approach this person like it's your family member.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have to show
I
tough love to my brother.
I can't even take credit for that. So Sergeant DeJesus, if you're watching this, that was from you.
Hats off to you. And I think that's something.
My other supervisor will probably roll his eyes at that comment, but
that's
we'll
fine.
see.
Shout out to you too. But if you embody that, because that looks different in some ways, right? There's some times where I've yelled at my brother. It comes out of love. There's some times where I have a heart-to-heart conversation with him. It comes out of love. There's some times where we've gone to fist. Not recommended in policing because it looks very bad. But it's out of
my fist. It's like a sledgehammer looking thing.
Boom! Stop. I love you. But at the end of every encounter, I'm always like, hey, you know why this went this way, right? Like, I didn't want it to go this way. And I will say the majority of the time, people understand, and it ends up being a mutual, you don't agree with the situation, obviously, right? I want you to be good and not end up in jail, and you are mad at me, so you try to fight me.
Sure.
None of us agree with what happens after that. But we respect, I get it, you're frustrated. I didn't approach you in the way you wanted approached.
A lot of times I get it.
Yeah, and I get it too.
There was only one time where I'm like he really got on my nerves. It was bad. Where I totally didn't get it. But the vast majority, it's like, I get where you're coming from.
And even if you don't, respecting their position, all right, I respect. It's not going to go how you want it to go, but I understand.
Well, and the time that I'm like, I don't get it, you are just just a horrible human being. I had that in my mind was actors in some domestic violence incidents where there was one time it was fine. It fell into my lap, where a girl was almost crawling out of the window of a car screaming for help because the boyfriend was assaulting her inside the car. And then he ended up punching me in the chest. I'm like, that was a bad mistake. But
yeah, there's been a long list of bad decisions that led you here.
I basically take him to the ground, handcuff, and I'm just sitting there. I'm like, most people I get, and you're just a horrible human being. Or you're a good human being that made a horrible mistake, but at the moment, I just think you're a bad human being.
Yeah, this is bad. And this is why this is this way. And I'll have the conversation. And most of the time they're like, whatever. I get it, whatever. Why are you taking that? It's like, dude, what do you mean why? Look at the decisions you've made. What did you expect? If you thought this clearly, now that everything's calm, how did you expect this to end? You walking away after you just put the bricks to your old lady?
No, and better yet, punching me. I'm like, what did you think was going to happen out of that? Oh, I was going to back off and say, oh, yeah, you're right.
Oh, you hit me.
You're right. You know what? You just convinced me. Go back to what you were doing. Hell no. And yeah, and, I get on the radio. I call for assistance because, I just got a guy. It was actually early on in the job for me when that incident happened too and then I had that freeze up moment where I'm like, I was on the job for 6 months at the time. And I'm like, what do I do here? Yeah, so I get on the radio, and all of a sudden you have all the sirens coming, and I'm like, oh, thank God.
And it's easy to fall into that because you show up to a call, you expect a certain level of respect, right? And then when that's crossed, you're
Oh,
like,
forget the call.
wait.
It fell into me. I was passing by this.
He's like, wait, you hit me. What do I do with this? Oh, wait, you gone to jail. No, all this to say, you have to be accountable, especially in this line of work. And it's a double-edged sword, right? Like, we as cops also have to approach people with respect because we're going into their situation. We're going into their issue, whatever it may be. So you have to have some sort of level of humility and humbleness as you approach this. Because if you don't, you're only making the situation worse. And if we're there,
Sure.
we're there to solve an issue. The best way to solve the issue is de-escalate. I understand it doesn't always happen, but what does de-escalate mean? That's a whole other thing that we could do a whole other episode on.
And honestly, it's probably one of the most important tactics you can learn. I mean, you see some cops with, I don't know how PA works with as far as use of force reporting, and if you see a lot, if there's an annual report that goes out, but, you see the guys with like 50 uses of force in the last year, which is wild to me. And then you look at me where it's like 1, 0, maybe, but, it's taking that time to talk them down. It's not that hard. It requires a little bit more effort. It requires a little bit more talking. It requires a little bit more sympathy.
Intention.
Sure.
You have to have good intention.
But you can make the job so much easier. Who wants to get into a fight every day? I don't. I certainly don't.
Yeah.
I don't think you do either. Who wants to fight somebody every day? I don't. I'm not a prize fighter. I'm not making millions of dollars doing this. Maybe if I was, all right, it'd put me in a ring about it.
Yeah.
But
Again.
I'm not a prize fighter. I want to help people. So if you learn these tactics, you learn de-escalation, you learn verbal judo, whatever you want to call it. And if you just have a little bit of care, you show some, love to your fellow man, that sort of thing, you'll have a good result 99.9% of the time, roughly.
No, and I agree because that's the situations we're most likely dealing with. I'm not saying coddle the bank robber.
No.
Just, that's obviously a different situation. Maybe after. Maybe that's what you're into.
Well, you don't have to be a dick to him in the headquarters.
Yeah. Like,
I mean, at that
resolved.
point, even if he's fighting you, the fight's over. You might feel some type of way. Well, and that's maybe a whole other subject. Maybe the person that just got assaulted shouldn't be the booking officer. That shouldn't be ever. But if it just so happens, you got to learn how to put that aside. Kind of like, in the Godfather movies, listen, it's not personal, it's just business. It's not personal in the end. It's, he felt like he had to do X, Y, and Z to get X, Y, and Z. Us, we have a job to do. So it's nothing personal against you. It's just, he was trying to get away or it's just business. But in the end, we have to be a professional. He doesn't have to be a professional. He's going to do whatever he does. But we swore to be professional. We swore to help people. We have obligations not to go too far in certain situations. And these are tenements we have to adhere to.
If that's not the best way to end it, I don't know what is. No, but I agree. To wind down,
that's what we call a closer.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like, we have a certain standard that we have to hold.
Sure.
We don't deal with people who embody that, and you have to understand that. That doesn't mean you stoop to their level.
No. Well, they didn't swear an oath. We did.
Yeah, exactly. So, what's something you hope people take away from this listening that they could apply as soon as this episode's over?
Well, from a law enforcement perspective, if you just put a little heart into people, if you give a little extra care, you learn about certain things to help care for people. We took a job to help people that cannot help themselves. If you follow that mindset and try to go it's not even the extra mile, the extra 12 feet of getting a pamphlet, of getting some resources, just getting some knowledge. It took me like 30 minutes to learn stuff in my county. That's about it. But it's helped me with so many different jobs. You just do that, you'll have, in my opinion, a more fulfilling career because you're not just enforcing the law, you're actually ending a revolving door cycle of different crimes, potentially.
You're helping change, and you're literally helping change in your community.
Exactly.
And then if that's not a good reason to be a cop, I don't know what is.
And you know what? Everybody has their own specialty. Everybody wants to do something different, and that's cool. There's tons of cool stuff you can do as a cop. SWAT team, seeing a crisis negotiator, patrol. That's traffic. People like some people like diving into traffic. I don't know.
Okay.
And to that end of it, not my thing, but it's some people's thing. Some people want to be a school resource officer. There's tons of different things. But everything I just said should be at least the foundation of what you build on. That one simple mindset. I want to help people that cannot help themselves, and I should learn the resources that are available to me, because the more I learn, the more effective I will be.
Well said. Well, I appreciate you for jumping on No Cop Out,
No, thanks for
driving
having me.
5 hours away to speak your mind and hopefully give some sort of resource to people listening, because that's the goal of this podcast, is for someone to tune in, see how one person thinks and go, I'm going to use that. Or maybe that's not the way I'm going to go about it. The end goal is to better equip yourself to hopefully do good for your community. And that's why we're here. So I appreciate you for jumping on No Cop Out. These episodes air last Monday of every month. So please stay tuned. I know it's not a lot, but these conversations are meant to be more deep, more intentional. Before we end, where can people tune into your nonprofit, and if they want to assist, how can they do that?
If someone wants to assist my nonprofit, we always have, money's always a problem, right? You want to house somebody, cost me about $100 a night in certain hotel situations where I get a flat rate. If I need someone medically screened, that costs money as well. And also just to do some public events that I do. Like this week, I'm actually taking a big group of veterans to see Stranger Things on Broadway, just so that way that veteran for their family could be king for a day. Oh, look, my dad was able to get me this. You know, it was such a cool show. Just to give them that experience. All these things cost money. I try to do it as cheaply as I can, but money's still a factor. If you're willing to help and you would like to help me on my mission, please visit NJVSA.org. You can make a donation right on the site for a one-time thing, or you could do a small monthly donation, whatever you feel like doing. And also on July 22nd, I have my first cigar whiskey event. I'm going to be doing that at a great partner of mine, the Waterside Restaurant in New Jersey, in North Bergen, New Jersey. They're very, very veteran positive, and they're helping me launch this event. But, on my website, I'll have tickets sold soon. I don't know if they're going to come from 5 hours away, but if I happen to get some New Jersey listeners, consider buying the ticket. I'll have premium cigars, and every ticket you buy will be going towards helping the veteran community.
Well, I appreciate you, Eric. And if you can't afford to donate, or maybe you're like, let me see what they're about, I encourage you to visit the site, share their stuff. It's good people doing good things, and that's the whole goal. That's why we're all put on this earth, right? To do good things. I appreciate you for jumping on. This is No Cop Out, and we're done. Later.